Welcome to episode 44 of Inside Politics, for teens by teens, where I explore the politics and issues impacting our generation. I'm your host, Christina Li, and today I've invited Rishika Dugyala, digital strategy editor at Politico, as well as Robin Turner, director of Editorial Diversity Initiatives at Politico. Rishika and Robin, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
for having us.
Christina. Thank
Yes,
you.
of course. So Rishika has this really amazing project that she published recently called the Gen Z Rising Project. So Rishika, would you mind, I guess, explaining the inspiration behind the project and what it seeks to accomplish?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of times when we talk about young voters, we're talking about 18 to 29-year-olds. And this year, that's both Generation Z and millennials. And in January, I thought it would be interesting to do a project dedicated solely to Generation Z, who's going to take up 1/10 of the electorate. I thought, what better way than to dig into not just the trends that we've seen among young voters, regardless of their generation, for years and years, but also what is different about Generation Z from even millennials, because they're extremely digitally native. They're the most diverse and progressive generation yet. How are they thinking about 2020 politics, the horse race coverage? Of course, since January, a lot has happened, and with the global pandemic and sort of the nationwide protests, and that's just part of it. And so it was something that we wanted to keep on and keep pushing through, especially when you look at how the tumult of 2020 is further impacting the way Gen Z engages with politics. We didn't want to give that up, even though there were so many other coverage ideas and requirements that popped up.
Definitely. And I guess, who is the intended audience of the project? Because I know that for me personally, as a member of Gen Z, it really did make me feel seen, that I was finally, that the opinions of my generation are finally getting some coverage in the news. But I also know that for older generations, the antics of Gen Z art can be a little confusing with TikTok and all of our slang. So I guess, what sort of audience is the project for?
That's a great question. We wanted to do a little bit of both. We didn't want to do this project without any Gen Z voices or do it geared toward just older generations, because what's the point of that? That's why we launched a call out. That's why we really focused in on our design to make it feel very politically online, to make it feel comfortable with the color scheme and the way that it used the hashtags and felt almost like the Discover page on TikTok. But when you think about who our major political audience is, this is also a way for them to have some insight into this youngest generation and why you can't just gloss over the term young voters. What is Generation Z really thinking about in terms of policy priorities, what they want to see out of a presidential candidate? They want to vote for somebody, but they're not going to let that stop them from voting against Trump for the large part, because they are the most left of center generation. So we tried to do a little bit of both, and our goal is with this project to open the door into more Generation Z and young voter coverage, because you've kind of created these contacts through a social media call out, through our interviews with Gen Z organizers, created this pathway of communication now to Politico and kind of expand our audience a little bit more to be inclusive of younger people.
Awesome. And I guess when you pitched this project, what was the reception like? Because as I understand, this is like the first project of its kind, Politico at least.
Yeah, everyone was very fascinated by it, just the idea of doing a Generation Z project. We went in really clear that if we're going to do this, it's not just going to be like a few stories. We want to build an entire hub page around it. We want to have really interesting visuals. We want to have a social media call out and a Gen Z specific poll tied to it. I think a lot of times when you think about young voter coverage and just doing one-offs here or there, you kind of get into the high level. And we wanted to make sure we could ground everything with data that really told a story and bring in analysis from the outside as well, to make it feel like you're going to step into the mind of Generation Z as a political force. And so once we kind of pitched it like that, like it has all these different components, like it's going to be tied to data, and it's going to be hard hitting, people were really on board. And it was just a matter of like getting everyone still thinking about it because, again, we pitched it in January and it published in October, right? So how do you keep everyone kind of thinking about it and working on it over that long, like, how many months was that? Like 9-month, 8-month period? So yeah.
Yeah, that's impressive. So I guess pivoting to the importance of this as it speaks to newsroom diversity in terms of generational perspectives. I know that as like a younger person, I don't know if you guys are on Reddit at all, but there's a subreddit called r/fellow kids, where it's just all like content of like adults thinking that they're cool and like using like kid language, but we do get tired of that. So like I guess a project by Gen Z for Gen Z is really like this really speaks to the importance of having representation through Gen Z to speak for Gen Z voices. So I was wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, and I'll start, but Robin, if you spoke a little bit to this earlier, so I'll definitely let you take over. But um, that was really important for me personally, the fact that a lot of people are interested in doing a project around Generation Z. I was by no means the only person in the newsroom who was like, it would be cool to do a Generation Z project. We got a lot of buy-in very early on. But in terms of how do you push something through and continue to advocate for it, I think the young people in the newsroom were really, really crucial in saying, we want to see this happen, even with the pandemic, even with the protests, even with all the other coverage mandates we got throughout the year. We want to see this happen because it's important for this generation to feel seen. And we had great help in doing that. But even in just the small things, right? Like we really had to advocate for all lowercase subheads or all lowercase titles, because that's a thing that young people our age do. Like the all lowercase thing is something that we have been doing. I don't remember when it popped up, but it just became a thing. And, there were editors who were just like, why is this a thing? Not that we don't like it, but do we need an all lowercase subhead? And we were like, yes, that's the whole point, So there's certain things that you can push for to make it feel like it's natural, and to make it feel like there is a space for young people, even in political media coverage. And that's largely driven by the young people in the newsroom.
Yes, no, I definitely noticed the all lowercase, and it felt like home. Like that page just felt like it really does feel like the front page of TikTok, and that's awesome. So Robin, I guess like as somebody who also fights for newsroom diversity, what are your thoughts on this?
So I think that this project is a perfect example to speak to the value proposition of having all of these strong journalists and many voices and perspectives in the work that we do. It also gives you a hint or a clue of our strategy at Politico in how we build smart teams. Because the thing of it is, you need to hear different voices. Everyone's going to have a different perspective of the same story, and each one is valid. If we are to meet our readership and community's needs, we have to show them that we're listening to them. And so it just is a logical progression and an inclusive way to build our newsroom, which we're very proud of the progress that we're making in such a short time. Politico is only 15 years old, and it's very nimble in that way. And maybe that speaks to our ideas for being an innovative company and an inclusive company, for sure. I also like to say that it's especially relevant at this time. And when we're looking at what's happening on our national landscape with regard to social movements, for example, and of course in social media, it is people like you, people in your age group and Rishika's contemporaries that are driving the conversation and are enlightening, kind of pulling the veil back and showing us that there is a power shift, and how we define and look at power is different. So from a diversity standpoint, I want to bring as many people to the table who are interested in doing this type of strong, authoritative journalism, but able to leverage it through social media and your networks and other ways. This is how we build strong teams at Politico, and it's showing up in our journalism.
That's amazing. So I guess looking towards the future as Gen Z and the other younger generations start becoming older and uh, they start to become more relevant in the journalism world in terms of representation and numbers. How do you predict the world of journalism changing in terms of newsroom diversity, in terms of the approach to journalism, or in other ways?
If that question is directed to me, I would say leadership. We are, in our newsroom, 49% of our leadership are women. But I see throughout the industry a lot of leadership shift, not only by women, but by people of color and other underrepresented groups. And when you have people who drive the mission of your company, who shape the coverage and coverage areas and ways to expand and to lead strategy, then you start to see a different commitment to journalism and in diversity. And I think that it's people like you, Christina, I expect to see, showing us how to approach our journalism really and truly. I think that what you're doing right now is phenomenal, and you're showing commitment in your interest area and already building sources. And so this is where it starts, but this is also how we find our new leaders.
Oh, thank you so much, Raman. That means a lot to me. And I guess Rishika, as somebody who is a Gen Z journalist, what is your take on this as you look ahead to the rest of your career?
Yeah, and I think the context of what it means to be a part of Generation Z is important even for Generation Z media, right? It's for everybody. The fact that Generation Z is so used to fast change. You are used to seeing, when you think about national politics, your major memories revolving around the change from President Barack Obama to Donald Trump, and they're two very different presidents, and they've led to two very different, like, just political worlds for Generation Z. You think about how fast technology has changed, and the fact that we've always had access to information in a way that even millennials have not had, and not seeing that kind of reflect in politics and in media. And so when you think about the activism and the sort of push and desire for change and inclusivity, and this sort of representation of everyone's perspectives coming from a generation that, again, is the most diverse generation yet, it's barely a majority of non-Hispanic white people. So when you think about how that reflects in media, I think it absolutely will create a change, because, again, people are entering this industry and questioning why certain things around diversity and pay and inclusivity in terms of coverage have not changed yet, and are taking it upon themselves to work with people who've been in the industry for a long time and have the know-how and the understanding of the politics even within the media industry to really push forward that change. And I think all generations are coming together to do that, and Generation Z has a huge role to play here because they are used to things changing quickly and want to see it happen in the industries that they step foot in.
Definitely. So as a final message to all of the Gen Z viewers out there, I guess, would both of you like to chime in on any, I guess, like words of wisdom or calls to action?
Rishika, you want to go first? You want me to speak?
You can go first.
All that we're talking about here today is really Constitution, right? We're defending the free press. We want strong and sustainable journalism told by authoritative voices with integrity. In a time when there's so many advocacy groups, when there's so many people telling stories from only one perspective, a strong independent press is needed more than ever if we're to make good decisions and to be able to tell what is fake news from what is true. We need new people and new voices to enter this process so that we can do deeper coverage and be more innovative in the process. So my strongest admonition or exhortation to Gen Zers is stay engaged in the process, number one. And number two, if you're a truth teller or like to be engaged through journalism, look into places like Politico that is a training ground and beyond a training ground for these types of careers. We have programs through our Political Journalism Institute where we train students. We have internships and fellowships, and more than that, jobs that lead to meaningful careers. So I would advocate strong independent journalism as opposed to advocacy journalism, where you can tell the truth and your voice will be heard.
Yeah, and I want to build off of what Robin was saying, and you know, don't be disheartened if your perspective is not already represented in this space that you want to enter. I think a lot of times you feel like it all rests on your shoulders to be the one talking about this stuff, or to be the one sort of suppressing your experience if it's not a mainstream experience or not something that you see reflected in male dominated and white dominated spaces, which media still can be. But you've just got to find your allies. I think you'll realize when you enter the newsroom that the perspective of people who are already there, people who do want change, people who are doing good work, you've just got to actively seek that out and, you know, join forces with them. There's strength in numbers, and your perspective will be valuable even if you enter space feeling like it's not already kind of the banner perspective just yet. So yeah, all kind of circling back to the whole stay engaged thing. I think that's especially true for journalism, where a lot of people can feel disaffected, especially if you're coming in as someone who's like, why isn't there a whole section dedicated to covering what I care about? You know, create that section or create some sort of movement in that direction. Then don't just sort of step back and say, you know, someone should have done it already, because maybe that's true, but you know, there are people willing to work with you to do it. You just have to be willing to put yourself out there.
Definitely. All right. Thank you so much, Rishika and Robin, for joining me here today. This is an awesome interview. I appreciated both of your insights. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see everybody next time on Inside Politics. Hi, everyone. This is Christina. Thank you so much for watching Inside Politics. And please feel free to check out the rest of the interviews on my channel. See you next time.